Hi, my name is Dr. Frank A. Thomas, and I had the opportunity to speak with Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hale, the senior pastor of Ray of Hope Christian Church, Decatur, Georgia, about preaching. Check out this clip from our conversation. To watch the full interview, click the link at the end of the video or in the description below. You will be blessed. What do you say when women call you who have been assaulted by patriarchy? I know you get these calls. So what do you say to women when assaulted, for lack of a better word?
Well, that's a good word. The first thing I do is to say, I hear you and I understand. I'm sorry that this has happened to you. And with all my heart, I wish that they hadn't had to go through this. Because by this time, I started in ministry almost 50 years ago. I think it should be over by now, but it's ancient. It started long before me. And so I'm sorry that you're having to deal with this. But I also tell them, if I might be a little spiritual, God works together in all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. You are called to this. You are called. And unfortunately, this is a part of the landscape that we are still struggling with. But let's find some creative ways for you to work through this, to get beyond the pain, and then to use it. Just like I have experienced rejection and assaults, I'm trying to now use it to help you and others. And so that's what I want you to do, is to, you have to go through the pain. You have to move past the grieving, get to the place of holistic thinking and attitude, because if you don't, you'll be bitter and you won't be any good for anyone else. And I know that personally. You won't be good for anyone else. And I really believe that the opposition comes to stop you from being all that God intended and certainly designed you to be. And so if you buy into that, then you are stopping the destiny that God has for you. You're hindering that.
Yes. Let's hit preaching. Let's talk about preaching, because it might be that preaching is one of the tools that we use to overcome.
I think so.
Even when they pull the sermon out. All right. But anyway, so would you say that preaching is one too? So tell me about your preaching, and then do you think that, you said that you preach your way, you didn't say preach your way through it, but we've heard that all of our lives, you preach your way through it. So tell me about preaching and its role for both women and men, but especially for women.
Well, I love to preach. And so through preaching, I tell the story, about Jesus and God's love for us and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. And so I think that preaching is the way that I have worked through my pain, not bleeding on people, because you have to be very careful about that, but sharing the story in such a way that people hear it and receive the benefits of your story and your pain. I've heard you do it masterfully.
Oh, thank you.
And in sharing that, both men and women are helped in that regard. But I know also that preaching is a way of empowering the oppressed, people who have been misused and abused. I'm a justice preacher. And I preach justice and equality for all. And so I try to hit every segment of personhood when I am preaching to bring people to wholeness, whether that's spiritually or physically or emotionally or mentally. And so I think that preaching is a wonderful tool for that, because when the word of God goes forth, it heals, it delivers, it sets free. It empowers, it challenges, it inspires, it encourages, all of that. And so I think it's a wonderful tool for us to use to bring wholeness to individuals. And going back to the sermon, that sermon, I know why there was so much opposition, because Dr. Gina's sermon really spoke to people in every dimension of life and their pains, or the people who might oppress them, or who are oppressed by their own prejudice or discrimination or whatever, or pain. It spoke to that so powerfully and called forth in us the courage to stand up and to say a word for Jesus, okay? And that's what we as preachers are called to do, is to say a word for Jesus. And there's healing for us and the hearers in that saying a word for Jesus.
So who are some of your preaching mentors?
Well, when I was coming along, I didn't know any women, I told you. But Alvin O'Neill Jackson came to my church, and he was my pastor. And I was in high school then. And so his preaching challenged me, excited me, it captivated me. You know, it was simple and yet profound. It was exciting, you know, Alvin, and I said, oh, wow. If I'm ever called to preach, I want to preach like that. And then Dolores Carpenter. Oh, yeah. Dolores Carpenter, a disciple woman. Yes. I heard her at a convention. So that's the first woman I think that I ever heard preach. And you know, Dolores is fiery. And so I thought, woo, I don't know if I could preach with that kind of fire. But she's also one that I really looked up to. Then I met Claudette Anderson Copeland.
What a preacher.
What a preacher. And, oh, Frank, at the time, I was in pain. And she came to preach at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, and I went there to hear her first, and then I invited her to Ray of Hope. But every time I heard her, for the first 3 or 4 times, I was being healed, okay? She was instrumental to my healing, because Claudette is one who goes and grabs you down deep, you know, and just, and first she has to cut you, then she I said, I'm already in pain. But she cuts you with that word. And then she applies the salve and heals. So I've met others since then, and heard others, many others, but those are my initial voices that spoke to me. When I was in seminary too, I heard some women, and I tried to preach like them, and I said, no. After about a couple of years, I decided, forget that. I am not them. I must be myself. But when I heard Claudette, I didn't want to be like her in the sense that I didn't want to imitate her, but I wanted to have the depth of thinking, the thoughtfulness, the spirit, the power.